Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. Recordings that we use as our iconic exemplars to compare to all other performances of the same work. Now, you may notice if you read reviews at ClassicsToday.com, which I hope you all do, that when we review a piece that has a reference recording, because not all of them do, we indicate what that reference recording is, so you know what we had in mind as a basis of comparison in writing the review of the performance in question. It's a handy tool. It's a wonderful bit of shorthand, critically speaking, for people who have record collections and who may be aware of some of these other versions, or who are looking to build a record collection and want to have these iconic performances. Most of them are older performances. Some of them are more recent. It depends on the work. There's no way to generalize it. You have to take everything on a case-by-case basis. And so today we're talking about Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, his third symphony, which came up already in the commentary where someone said, well, there are 30 billion recordings of it. How do you have a reference recording? Well, one of the points I make in this series, and that I insist upon, is that there is, in fact, a critical consensus and a general public consensus, which is a little bit more vaporous and hard to pin down. But if you've been in the business, as I have for 40 some odd years, 40 some odd years, then you kind of know what these things are. You know what they are by talking, by listening, by reading reviews, by reading magazines, by looking at stuff in multiple languages in critical way. Now we have websites and chat rooms and all this stuff. Their consensus does exist. It really does. It's not often talked about, and it's not 100% devoid of subjectivity. And we're going to talk about that in a second, and you'll see exactly what I mean. But yes, there is a consensus about what the reference recording is for the Eroica, or reference recordings, because sometimes there's more than one. There's a tiny handful in a work that gets recorded 1 billion times. Maybe you should have a couple, more than one. I happen to have one, but others may add in one or two others, which I would consider legitimate. The problem with the Eroica, as the original writer pointed out, is it's recorded by everybody. And so it's really, and has been wonderfully recorded by a bunch. So it's very hard to pin down exactly what a reference recording consists of or what the consensus may be. And for example, a lot of people back in the day were very, very powerful proponents of Toscanini's last recording of the Eroica from, I think, 1951 or something like that. And it's marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous. It's in mono, but it's marvelous. Or one of the Furtwängler Eroicae, because there are like a dozen of them or something like that. But these guys, in my view, have watered down their chances of being a reference recording because they just did the piece too many times, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. And so there's no point in hunting around for that one version amongst all of the other versions that they did. I'm not saying that they weren't brilliant conductors or that they didn't do wonderful, wonderful work, in performing the Eroica. But generally speaking, there is value in scarcity. The fewer times you did something, if it's unapologetically great, the better off you're going to be. So, and those are older recordings in iffy sound. So I don't think it's necessary. I generally try to do recordings in stereo, some in mono, depending on what they are, but mostly in stereo when I can, as reference recordings, if there's an unambiguous choice. In this case, there is. And let's just get to it. That unambiguous choice is George Szell and the Cleveland Orchestra. Why is this the reference recording? Well, because Szell's mastery of the Austro-Germanic repertoire was second to none. It really was second to none. He was so exacting that even Toscanini got pissed with him. He criticized the NBC Symphony. He was a taskmaster. He was one of those great conductors. His whole Beethoven cycle is basically terrific. But this Eroica is special for a number of qualities. The most obvious is the coda of the finale, which has never been done in anything like this kind of excitement and precision. And I actually think reorchestration of some, he sort of diddles the brass parts a little bit. But my goodness, it's just thrilling. And this is a piece where, as I've said before, has a coda problem in my view. I think that it's really hard to bring off the end of that symphony and make it sound exciting and in tune and appropriate as a capstone to everything that's come before. But not here. Not here. It goes really, really, really well. I mean, other possibilities in Eroica were Klemperer and Pierre Monteux, and there are quite a few others that are really super. But this one has personal and exciting qualities, along with amazing orchestral playing, top to bottom transparency, gorgeously available bass lines, which you can hear, which is really makes a big difference in the funeral march. Really, it's an extraordinary performance all around. It's perfectly paced. And most people, when they talk about great recordings of the Eroica, will mention this. It may not be their favorite. That's not the point here. And I noticed right away, of course, in talking about reference recordings, that some of you immediately came in with, well, my favorite is this, or I think it's that. No one cares. That's not the point. That's not why we're doing this exercise. We're doing this exercise to try and isolate and identify the consensus picks. And whether you like them or not is just not important. That's not what's happening, because we're looking at facts, or semi-facts, as factual as you get in the world of classical music, reviewing and taste and preference and all those things. The versions that even people who may not like this approach will concede is a superb performance. So it's the Szell Cleveland Eroica, as simple as can be, because of its really special qualities that nobody has really matched or offered anything comparable to. And wow, and it's held up. It's held up all these years. I mean, it's in Stereorama, whatever that was. And when was it originally recorded, I wonder? It was like in the 50s at some point, wasn't it? The late 50s. It has does it have a date here? I just love the fact that they never want to tell you what the dates are. Wait a minute. Let me look, just for fun, and then we will wrap this up. Hang on, I got my magnifying glass here. 1957, 58. There we are. Yeah, kind of amazing, isn't it? 70 years old. Yeah, roughly 70 years old. Wow, baby. But it sounds wonderful. I will point out one other thing. I've seen some people fetch and complain that the coda is wonderful because the timpani don't come through as loudly as they might. And some people spend a lot of time listening for timpani parts. I was a percussionist. I played timpani. I know where that's coming from. And I, too, would have preferred more prominent timpani. But, on the other hand, you don't make the argument that, like, period instrument people, always have that, because Beethoven would have had small drums with calfskins and hard little stickies, that doesn't mean that the timpani parts would have been all that much louder. It depended on the performance of the player and everything else. You can't say that Szell is wrong. That's a preference. You can have that preference if you want. I tend to think that when everything else is going fabulously, unless the timpani parts are actual solos, it doesn't make much difference. That's my feeling. It's my feeling. But it doesn't change the consensus, you see? That's what I mean here. Everyone has their preferences, but beyond the preferences, there is the history of the view and reception of the recording in question. And that is what we're talking about. So yes, it is the Szell Eroica, if you're having only the reference recording. And it's a very good version to compare others to, because it has those special qualities which by which others can quite reasonably be judged. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.